The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the iHeartRadio Network, Talkstar Radio Network. Let me see, where else, Craig, are we these days? Mutual Broadcast Network across Europe and Asia on Euro Radio TV and on the X Zone Broadcast Network. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And to find out about the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net. Exonation, my guest this hour is Cheryl Costa. Cheryl is a two-service military veteran, a retired aerospace security engineer, and she's a published writer and playwright. As a playwright, Cheryl's stage plays have explored the offbeat and the metaphysical. She has had a lifelong interest in the subject of UFOs. This deep interest led her to author the weekly newspaper web blog titled New York Skies for SyracuseNewTimes.com. For the past 4 years, she has written lively accounts of the subject of historical UFO sightings in New York, UFO statistics, disclosure, and other topics. First of all, welcome to the show, Cheryl. And what was it that made you so interested in UFOs?
Well, I saw my first one when I was about 12, and it was a late August afternoon, and about 2 weeks before school started, and we were visiting a relative, and we were coming down the hill from their farm in Savona, New York, and clear blue sky, 4:30 in the afternoon, and out there was a big silver ball just sitting there. And I tell people, if you put your arm all the way out and look at your little finger, the fingernail is about the size of how big that ball was.
Was this your first and only sighting, or have you had other sightings since then?
Oh, I've had plenty of other sightings since then, but that was my first one. My mother explained to me it might be a balloon, might be something from the Air Force. And then she dropped the big one on me and says, might be people from another planet. And she was very well read at that point, and she explained it all to me, and I was fascinated. So when we started driving the car again, my father was driving the car, I was looking out the rear window of the car, and I watched it just sitting there. And then when it decided, just for about another 10 minutes, and then when it decided to go, it was like, boom, it was gone. It shot off at a tremendous speed and just disappeared. And that just took my breath away.
Were there any reports in the media about the UFO sighting that you had?
No, none.
Why do you think that is?
Well, maybe nobody reported. Remember, this was a very rural area in upstate New York where we were seeing this. So the population of the little town we were visiting my aunt and uncle at was probably only about 300. So it could have easily been missed.
Did you or any other member of your family make a report to local authorities?
No.
Why not?
No, we did not. I don't know why we never did that. I don't know what my parents were thinking, but no, it wasn't that kind of thing back in those days. Who were you going to call? The local newspaper or the police department? You know, and my mom chose not to do that. She's very shy. But thereafter, as we both found books in the library coming in about UFOs, late 60s, there was a lot of, this was around 65, 66 time frame. There were a lot of cool books coming out. Frank Edwards came to our town to speak on the subject matter. I went to go see it and see him talk. I was in junior high at that time, and I went to go see him talk, and I thought there'd be a couple hundred people in this auditorium. The place was jammed. It was like 2,300 people in the auditorium. And so, again, that added to it. And then my next sighting was in 1971. I was in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Cam Bay, Vietnam. And it was Christmas Eve, 1971. I was going down to go to midnight mass with a friend of mine. And we were walking across the base, and where we were was out on essentially Cam Bay is a big sandbar. It's like being at Virginia Beach, So a gazillion stars in the sky.
All right, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, more of this Christmas Eve sighting. And our guest this hour, Exonation, is Cheryl Costa. To find out more about Cheryl, or if you'd like to get a copy of her book that was co-written with Linda Miller Costa, the name of the book is UFO Sightings Desk Reference, and it's available on Amazon.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Cheryl Costa is my guest. Cheryl, along with Linda Miller Costa, they've co-authored UFO Sighting Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2015, and it's available on Amazon.com. Cheryl, before we went to the break, you just started to tell us about your another UFO sighting, I believe it was 1971, on the beach in Vietnam. So if you could please continue that.
Well, a friend of mine and I were walking over to the base chapel to go to midnight mass, about 11:30 at night, and I kind of glanced up into the western sky, and right there below constellation Taurus, there was this streaking white light, and I thought, it's a jet, and then it stopped and just sat there for a second, and I'm thinking to myself, well, now what are you going to do? And it started darting around like a bumblebee.
Mm-hmm.
It stopped again, and it took off like you see the starships take off in the movies. Gone, And that just took my breath away. My friend was sitting there with his jaw hanging out. He said, what did we just see? Neither one of us had our mind on midnight mass when we got there. But that was my other, what I'm going to call confirmation sighting. Over the years, I've read a lot of books. About 20 years ago, I was recuperating from some surgery, and a friend of mine let me stay in his house because he was taking care of his father who had cancer. So he told me, feed the cat and stay at my house. Because at the time I was between apartments when I got hospitalized.
Right.
And this guy had first editions of just about all the best UFO books ever written to that point. And so place didn't have cable, so I had a lot of time on my hands, so I read. And I got very heavy on the topic and formed whatever opinions I had about the topic through that period of time. That was about 91 time frame. And that's pretty much how I got really deep into it. I didn't consider myself any kind of an activist or any kind of a writer on the topic or anything. I just considered myself a UFO bystander, just somebody who was interested in the topic. And then in 2012, I saw a newspaper article one night that got my attention, and to say it in short words, got me very upset and ticked off. And I said, I'm going to do something about this.
Well, what were the words that got you ticked off?
Well, it was a sidebar story. It was November 4th, 2012. It was a sidebar story on CNN.com. And it simply read, the headline to it said, UFOs have been declining since the 80s. Maybe they were always just an urban legend. And the article pretty much talked to that tone.
Okay.
And in the back of my head, I'm sitting here saying, that doesn't sound right. And I was working for a different newspaper at that time, and we had just put the morning edition to bed, and the presses were rolling, and we basically just had to sit there until they were done. And so I Googled MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, for the first time in my life. And I went there and I looked up the yearly summaries for like a 20-year period from like 1980 to 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And I dropped the numbers I wrote them down on a pad, dropped them onto an Excel spreadsheet, and plotted it. And the bar graph went up like a rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, what memo didn't the UFOs get?
Yeah, well, you see, I have to wonder about the statistics from MUFON myself, because MUFON is an organization that is geared towards ufologists and those who believe. So the accuracy or the validity of a lot of their statistics cannot be authenticated.
Well, okay, let's go there a minute.
Sure.
Our book was based on MUFON and National UFO Reporting Center raw data.
Okay, so that's Peter
so
Davenport.
The stuff's not vetted.
Yeah. All right, but these, but I'd like to point out to our listeners who may not know about these two places. The National UFO Reporting Center is where you call in, you file the report yourself. Nobody validates or verifies the report. MUFON, the same thing.
Correct.
Okay, so go on.
So I just took the raw numbers and put them in, and I saw, like I said, the chart went up like a rocket. Shortly thereafter, I approached a couple of the editors at the paper I was working at, and they laughed me out of the office. And then I went to a couple of other papers up here in upstate New York and got either thrown out of the office, or as one editor said, "What brand of tinfoil do you wear?" And finally, I got an appointment with an editor at a weekly paper, the Syracuse New Times, and the editor-in-chief sat down with me before I ever had a chance to show him the 4 or 5 slides I had, just basically PowerPoint slides with my pitch. He sat there and talked to me for 45 minutes about UFOs, and he had read about all the same stuff I had, so he was sympathetic to the topic matter.
Right.
And he said, "Okay, we'll try it for a month." So, and then he says, "If we don't pull any traction with page views, bye." And I said, "Okay, fine." So I did 4 or 5 articles, and at the end of the month, he called me up the phone, asked me to come over. I figured, well, that's it, And I said, "So you're taking me off?" And he says, No. You're pulling more page views than most of the columnists combined." So they decided to keep me, and we've just continually tried to improve the column ever since.
Why do you think UFOs are such a point of interest with a certain facet of society?
I don't think it's just a certain facet. A lot of people seem to think it's only this really tiny cult following. There was just in fact, I just did a story last week on this. Fox Pictures, 21st Century Pictures, I had a survey done to sort of support the DVD release of their movie Phoenix Forgotten.
Right.
And 47% of the American public believes in these things.
Yes,
now,
but you know as well as I do, being in the media, that polls can be skewed any way you want them to be skewed, depending on who you ask.
Oh, agreed. Now, I was appreciative of those numbers for 2 reasons. One, the last good poll that was done by National Geographic in 2012, and they asked 3 questions for, are you believing or interested or knowing of UFOs? And the ones that believe was like about 42%. The ones who were on the fence was like about another 40%, and then the 17% says it's baloney, there's no such thing. Okay, and that one always felt about right. Okay, and that's kind of the numbers I quoted. So when Fox Pictures came out with this one, it said 47%. I was kind of optimistic. Maybe there's been some enlightenment out there. Now, well,
don't you think that if Fox was going to put a poll out, it would be in favor of their film? They certainly wouldn't put out a poll that showed a negative response to the type of film that they're putting out there. That's just common sense. It's good marketing.
Well, yeah, you'd say that, but the focus of their film wasn't UFOs. It was abductions during the fictional abductions set against the setting of the Phoenix Lights.
Yeah,
years ago.
That's UFO genre. That's
yes.
You're talking about strawberries, blueberries, and cranberries. They're all berries.
Yes, agreed. Well, the bottom line with all of this was that, according to the poll, 53% And this is what I found interesting. 53% said they had seen something. And I went back and looked into the study to see what the age range was. And over half was what I would say my age range, 55 plus. So I assumed a sighting window of about 50 years, 1967 to now. Okay, this maybe when all these sightings happened,
right,
for that 53 million people. And if you divide 50 into that, it came back out about 1 million sightings a year. Well, the funny thing about that was, and two other researchers saw the similarity, I came up with a very similar number with the sighting data from our book.
Yeah.
About 1 million sightings a year, even though we only report 121,000. There's a standard theory around that only 1 in 10 people reports what they see. So when you crank it back against times 10, it came up a little over 1 million. So there seems to be some consistency there in the numbers.
Once again, based on the source of the numbers.
Well, the source of the numbers in my book, were strictly the database raw data. And I know a lot of people were upset. Well, you didn't vet them. I can't vet them.
Well, then how can you take that data?
I assume that a certain number of people.
But how could you take that data as legitimate if it can't be vetted?
No. They're all UFOs. They're all unidentified flying objects.
But that doesn't
Airplanes,
right. So it doesn't mean that they're all little spacecraft from God only knows where.
No, we only say, Linda and I only probably figured, we told them in one of our analysis chapters that perhaps only about 6% are something very exotic.
Very exotic, but you didn't identify them as spacecraft from another planet.
Whatever those things are. It could be spacecraft from another planet, it could be interdimensional craft, whatever these
So if we're talking a variance, if we're talking an actuality of 6% compared to identified but not exotic sighting of 94%, what's the significance in the book?
Well, okay, there you go with the 94% noise. And I had a problem with that as well. The issue is that, okay, here's a handful of pins in a big stack of hay, as they say, a needle in a haystack. We don't know which one of those 121,000 are the genuine article, as they say.
Okay.
So we took the approach when we were putting the book together. These are what people say they saw. Somewhere in there is the truth, but this is the scale of something's going on because there's smoke here, and this is a very big number. And if you start looking at the percentages, there's a bigger number out there. In fact, the 121,000 number suggests about 30 something specials a year. If you go back against that million number,
wait a second. 30 specials. Okay, 30 specials a year. I don't understand that.
30 close encounters of the third kind of events. Something very special, exotic. Those guys coming down from the sky.
Maybe.
That's what it suggests.
That's what it suggests, but it hasn't been vetted. It hasn't been verified. It hasn't been authenticated either. It's speculation.
Well, perhaps.
Perhaps.
For the researcher who's trying, no one's ever done this compiling before. This is the complaint that I had.
Have you ever heard of Chris Rotowski?
Everybody was always just telling stories.
Have you ever heard of Chris Rotowski?
The numbers up.
Have you heard about Chris Rotowski? Chris has done this analytical study before. He's with the University of Manitoba.
Okay, I know who he is.
You know, he's done these figures as well. Steve Bassett has done these figures, showing anywhere from 96 to 98% of the naysayers compared to the 4 to 6% of those who believe. Those figures aren't new. What in your book is new?
We add, okay, they've done all that. What we did was we went in, and neither database had good county data. We put in the county data, so we had the ability to drill down to the county and show you within a state what counties, who had what sightings.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that began showing us patterns, and patterns no one had ever seen before.
All right, we've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Please stand by.
Okay.
Exonation, Cheryl Costa is our guest this hour. Cheryl, along with Linda Miller Costa, they're the authors of UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2015. It's available on Amazon.com. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't forget, if you'd like to get the current edition of the X Chronicles newspaper, it's available at www.xchroniclesnewspaper.com. We're talking about UFOs this hour here in the X Zone. Cheryl Costa is our special guest, along with her Linda Miller Costa. They're the authors of UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America 2001 to 2015. And it's available on Amazon.com. All right, so what did you find out during the analytical study of the counties based on the reports from the MUFON database and the information from the National UFO Reporting Center?
Well, I had already done this for New York State during the course of writing my column, and we compiled how to do this. And there was some process involved. We had to write some process because it was not just add the numbers up, because there was some messiness with the way the databases were kept. So we wrote process for doing it. And one of the things that came out of the whole thing was we started sharing with some New York State investigators, and we started seeing patterns. Like, give an example. We all knew that there was a Lake Erie effect. Lots of sightings out there in the Niagara frontier around Erie County, Niagara County. But what we didn't know was suddenly when they have county data in there, suddenly we're seeing almost equivalent numbers in Monroe County, which is essentially Rochester, New York, that general area. Essentially, that brought up the idea maybe we've got a Lake Ontario effect. We also noted that majority, 51% of the sightings in New York State followed down the New York State counties that line the St. Lawrence Seaway, and 19% there, and then about 30%, 32%, something like that, from Lake Champlain all the way down the Hudson to the Atlantic Ocean. And that was 51% of the sightings. And that caught people. People always thought there was something to do good with UFOs in the Hudson. They were always claiming it was a hotbed of activity, but nobody realized that it was running along both of our major waterways.
Let me ask you, when doing your analytical survey of the data pertaining to Lake Erie, the Niagara frontier, as well as the Rochester area going down the Hudson into the Atlantic, did you take airport traffic into consideration, and did you also take TRACON into consideration?
Nope, we just worked with the raw numbers. We didn't have a way of vetting that.
But you didn't have a way of vetting the raw numbers either, and yet you took the raw numbers that weren't vetted.
Well, we took the raw numbers, but we were putting it against the locations. That was all we were doing. We were not trying to vet the thing against Victor routes or something like
Why
that.
not?
We didn't have the resources.
What do you mean you don't have the resources? All those routes are available online.
Of course they are.
So
no, what I'm saying is we didn't have the time resources to sit down and analyze 121,000 records against every Victor route. These reports don't have the kind of accuracy data don't have the accuracy data that a lot of people think they've got. People think they've got latitudes and longitudes, and they're all trained observers. Probably maybe 1 out of 10 of these sightings has anything close to a trained observer telling you what angle it was on the horizon. Or
I understand that. I understand that. However, if you're going to do an analysis on non-vetted data, how could you not include or give the reader the information that this does not include air traffic or TRACON information? This way here, the reader would have the opportunity of saying, well, maybe it wasn't a UFO. Wait a minute. Look at this. It's within the air traffic control center of, let's say, Pearson International Airport. We know for a fact that one of the most busiest air corridors in North America is over Lake Erie. We know that.
I would agree with you.
Does the common person who may have an interest in UFOs, who has no idea about anything when it comes to air traffic control or flight centers, TRACON, shouldn't they be aware of this, that the data could include not false sightings, but sightings of commercial?
We say that in our book. We say that in the 5 analysis chapters. We indicate that these things can be a lot of other things.
Okay,
but let me explain what the book's objective were.
Please.
We were not trying to prove that this. I've had people beating me up and saying, well, "You can't prove they were really aliens from outer space." No, we never set out to do that.
So what did you set out to do?
Our objective was to overcome that one statement that said that UFOs, unidentified flying objects, have been decreasing since the 80s, and that is not the truth. They have not been. UFO sighting reports have been increasing in 3 waves since 2001 to 2015.
Then let me ask you something. How come the Canadian government disbanded anything to do with UFOs on a governmental or official platform? Anything to do with UFOs now is channeled to a private organization.
I don't know.
Because
I don't know enough about what they were doing.
Because the number of UFOs over Canada have decreased drastically. Now, if they've decreased drastically in Canada, I'm sure the same as can be said for the United States. Australia's UFO sightings are going down. The United Kingdom going down. So this is what I can't understand when you're saying that UFO sightings are up.
Based on the raw numbers, they've gone up from about 3,400 in 2001 up to about 12,000 in the last years of the report.
All right. Now, during those times, what television shows have been aired that could have an influence on people looking up and misidentifying? Why not? Why not? Why not? What do you mean, let's not go there?
Well, let me explain something. Somebody made that crack on me some time back.
It's not a crack. It's a legitimate question, and you as a journalist should be able to appreciate skepticism.
I do.
So what do you mean?
When I was being interviewed by the New York Times, we did discuss this, and one of the things we looked at there's a spike, not in the national chart as much as a handful of states had a spike. I mean, a drastic spike in 2008. Okay. And I asked around on that, and somebody from MUFON explained to me that there had been in 2008 I think a Discovery Channel program, and they happened to mention MUFON and where you could report these things. So one of the things I did was when we were combining the database, we kept a column for the service. So if it came from MUFON, we knew which ones they were. If we came from NUFORC, we knew which ones they were. And we did a plot for a couple of states, and we saw that the NUFORC numbers were on a consistent rise, going upwards on a consistent slope. When we looked at MUFON, it was tracking right along till it hit the 2008, and then it literally jumped up 30 points and then continued tracking upwards. So yes, media does have some effect on this.
How come mainstream media doesn't carry stories about UFOs? It's always the offshoot media that does.
I don't know. I've talked to a number of editors and news directors, and a lot of them, when I tried to explain to them what we had done here, as soon as they heard the word UFO, they either hung up or just their tone of voice changed, and then they got me off the phone. There's a lot. I've actually had one science reporter at a major paper on the West Coast say to me, "Oh, the whole issue of UFOs was settled years ago." And all I can think of is maybe he really bought into the Condon report back in 68, 69 time frame. I don't know. What's interesting, though, is that a number of people have looked at this material and said, well, wait a minute, you took a little bit different approach here. There's a little bit more science involved here instead of the anecdotal and storytelling most of the UFO books have. All we were trying to do was put some statistics out there for people to work with. And investigators find this thing very helpful, because instead of spending hours on CMS at MUFON trying to find out how many, say you're an investigator and you're going to go to a town or a county and you want to have a ballpark idea of what they've had going on in the past, suddenly here's a book here that can give you the raw counts for both services.
All right, now you say investigators. Are you talking about professional investigators, or are you talking about UFO researchers?
I'm talking about the MUFON, principally the MUFON investigators.
All right, so we're talking about amateur investigators, not professional investigators.
Amateur investigators. Almost
Okay.
everybody out there doing this is an amateur.
But if this was such a legitimate concern, don't you think that more people would be taking it seriously?
Well, they've been told there's been a policy of ridicule and denial for close to 70 years here in the United States. And a lot of people were programmed in the 60s and 70s. Oh, you didn't see anything, because if you do say you saw something, people will come, the newspaper or the television station will come out, put a camera in your face, and then make you look like an idiot on the 6 o'clock news. And then people got that message real quick, and a lot of people don't talk about it. What I did find, though, is in the course of writing my column in the last 4 years, is a lot of families are handing these UFO accounts within families. They're handing them down like family heirlooms. It's interesting. I've had a number of invites to people's backyard barbecue. We want to introduce you to our Uncle Ralph, who saw a Foo Fighter during the war, or our Aunt Sally, who saw this, And so they were willing to open up as a family and tell me what they knew. But were they going to pick up the phone and call the police department or call a newspaper and talk to it? No, they didn't want that level of visibility.
But, a lot of people in today's society will say anything for 5 minutes of glory.
No, but it's not like I was going to mention their name in the paper. I tell them all up front. My editor and I change all the names so you won't get any visibility or public accolation.
But why would you change? Why would you change the names? Doesn't that take away from the credibility of the story?
No. We didn't want to out people. Literally, that was the objective. We didn't want to out people, for one, and two, it was the only way we could get a lot of people to open up and talk to us.
So how do the readers know that they're actually reading something that somebody said and not something that was made up? Especially since the story can't be vetted.
I can't give you an answer there. I try. We try to, like, when I pull stories out of the databases, I keep all the data. Sometimes I have to put a little bit of story to it to explain what was going on, but the facts are always there.
How can you call them facts when they haven't been vetted?
We don't. Who has the resources to vet all that stuff?
Then how can you say something's a fact if you haven't verified its authenticity?
No, we took the position we're just simply reporting what people say they saw.
So if there's information in there that has been made up, that is also included in the statistical data.
Statistically, using some formulation, I think the Blue Book used, we estimated it was under 4%, probably down around 3%. In fact, we bear with me. We also looked at the sightings that were listed in National UFO Reporting Center. Very frequently would mark ones that they thought were a hoax, and we did that measurement on all the ones that came from them, and it really shook out to well under 3%.
Were your statistics checked by a mathematician or a professional person who does analytical statistics?
No.
We'll be back on the other side of this break. X-Zone Nation, Cheryl Costa is our guest. Cheryl Costa and Linda Miller Costa. They're the authors of UFO Sightings Desk Reference. And if you'd like to get a copy, Amazon.com. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone and wrap up this hour talking about UFOs. If you'd like to find out what's on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, 24/7, 365, including Kevin Randall, A Different Perspective, and Larry Lawson, Paranormal Stakeout, visit www.xzbn.net. Cheryl Costa is our special guest, along with Linda Miller Costa. They are the authors of UFO Sighting Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2015. It's available on Amazon.com. com. Throughout the first three segments of the interview, Cheryl, you've mentioned MUFON and the National UFO Reporting Center quite often. Were they part of any funding for this book?
No. This was Linda and I did this out of our own pocket on our own time.
Are you a member of MUFON?
No, I am not. In fact, I purposely am not because my editor and I felt it was a conflict of interest.
Did they give you total access to their database?
I made a request to them,
Mm-hmm.
and then initially I was refused, and then Linda sat down and had a long talk with them. She's got a little bit more executive skill than I do, and they were able to get us the abstract we were looking for. They were afraid we were asking for confidential information. All we were looking for was what, when, and where, and so they were able to give us a condensed file that we were
Gotcha.
able to suck into our database and clean up and everything.
Do you think the United States of America and other governments around the world are suppressing the truth about UFOs? And if so, why?
I do believe that. I do believe it for a couple of reasons. I think, okay, if you get beyond experimental aircraft and top secret military stuff and everything, I think they were very smart when they started with this stuff back in the Robinson panel back in the 50s, that people weren't ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got to remember back in the early 50s and like that, maybe even the 40s, everything that crawled out of some kind of a spacecraft was some kind of slimy, bug-eyed monster. These days, our view of aliens are Mr. Spock, Doctor Who, and Luke Skywalker. So it's a very different atmosphere now, and there's apparently been a very strong education campaign to get people used to the idea.
So why do you think the governments of the world, if this phenomenon is real and there are really little men flying around in UFOs within our airspace, why do you think that they would suppress it from the public if the statistical information is right and so many people have already seen these little things?
I think if you have you ever interviewed Steve Bassett?
Many, many, many times.
Okay, you know the kind of trouble he's had with people in the government.
Well, I think and I think that a part of that reason is that Steve has turned ufology into a business.
Well, okay, if you want to say that. But here's the deal. My experience, I reached out to my elected officials, and they claimed they lost the letter that I sent them with a 2.5-pound book stapled to it.
Mm-hmm.
I got them another copy and got them another book, and I have nothing but deathly silence because the subject matter has been painted with the silliness and kook brush.
Could it also be that in today's society,
in the government,
could it also be
the elected officials? They don't.
Could it also be that in today's society, where there's a lot more going on in the world than just people looking in the sky for UFOs, that UFOs are not that important?
That's true. I would agree. There are many people who want nothing to do with it. My sister, I gave her a copy of the book, and she didn't care. On the other hand, my mother did. She looked at it. A lot of other people I gave a copy of the book to, they cared, but there was an awful lot of people who do not care. It's not on their radar, and they're not interested because it doesn't affect how they do their job or how they go to work in the morning. So everybody's open to their own opinion. If we do really have extraterrestrials or interdimensionals visiting us, there's a certain portion of the population, if you believe one of the surveys, maybe 17 to 20%, that's going to be really shocked. And there's that other percentage that's 40% or so they say is on the fence, just needs a little bit of confirmation and disclosure. I don't think anybody in a political elected capacity wants to stick their neck out and say anything.
Why not?
Again, the ridicule factor. There was a council person down in Phoenix, Arizona, that stood up for the people who were saying we just had this massive sighting here, and the opposition party used that against her in the next election. She was just standing up for her constituency, but everybody made a big case. Oh, it's so silly to be talking about UFOs when half the town saw it. So there are people who just don't want to stick their neck out because it's politically not good for your career.
I've been doing this show for 26 years.
Yes, sir.
And I'll tell you something. Within the world of ufology, nothing has changed. No super new sightings. No extraordinary alien abduction stories. The last big one was Travis Walton. And even what was considered at one time the Mecca of ufology, Roswell, undergoing new investigative techniques and using new investigation protocols, is proving to be false. So what is the public supposed to think? You watch TV and all these so-called reality shows are anything but real. Hollywood puts out E.T., Close Encounters, Independence Day. What is the public supposed to think?
I don't know what they're supposed to think. For years, I always tested this material myself in the sense that what did I weigh? And in fact, it was right up until about 2012 myself that I was 50-50 on it. And then one day I read some stuff from a paper written back in the 1960s by somebody from NICAP about Roswell, and it's information, statistical and research information that you never hear about on television, never ever hear about. And for me, that was a smoking gun. And I said, "Wow," because I didn't even put very much credit into Roswell. I thought it was misinformation campaign for years. And it wasn't until I read that book that I had any concept of how much activity was going on. They had sightings in 38 states going on, and there were clusters, and it was a huge deal. And it was started long before weeks before Roswell, and weeks before Ken Arnold. And that's what got me thinking. Maybe there is something to all of this. Maybe there is even something to Roswell. Up until that point, I didn't even really believe Roswell ever happened.
The fact that Roswell has been turned into a circus for a week each and every year, doesn't that also take away from the credibility of anything that is left of the Roswell case?
I think it does.
The fact that Jesse Marcel broke protocol by bringing evidence to his family and letting his family touch and play with this alleged evidence that he took from the Brazil farm instead of following proper protocol and taking it from the Brazil farm directly back to the base. Doesn't that also kill the story?
Oh, I don't know.
Now, come on, you're a former member of the military.
What would you do in that situation? Would you follow protocol?
Yes, I would. I'm a former police officer. You're damn right I would.
Okay. All right. I follow your drift. And
you break the chain of evidence, you don't have a case.
Agreed. And if it was military evidence, I come from that background in the Air Force.
Right.
So I agree with you. You wouldn't break the chain of thing. And he did break protocol in that context.
Yeah.
I don't know if Roswell's the real thing or not. I've seen evidence to suggest it. That's all I can talk to. I think what bothers me is that, as you said, some of these Hollywood, all these upper cable channel type programs, a lot of them start out and say, well, it all starts with Roswell.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. And they're telling a very, very slanted story. And there's a lot more activity, a lot more things that have been going on long before Roswell. And I think that's what torques me off more than anything else, is that they're not telling the whole story. They're telling in the part that they want to publicize and the part they want to talk up. And that makes me suspicious.
Do you think there's any way that credibility can be restored within the UFO community, especially with what's gone on with MUFON over the last couple of weeks with the slanderous remarks that have been coming from inner circle members, as well as the fact that Jan Harzan refuses to do anything about it?
That's a tough one. That is a tough one. Right now, MUFON and NUFORC are the only real. There's a couple other smaller groups of people out there who are doing investigations, But right now, they're the only ones that are out there doing any serious investigations. But then again, you got to throw another thing at them and say, Jesus, they used to be serious about the investigations. These days, they only seem to be interested in money.
Yeah. That's
And,
right.
and granted, I know you got to have money to run an organization, but I mean, this is getting a little ridiculous, you know.
Yeah. Well, we've come to the end of this hour, Cheryl. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to get a copy of Cheryl and Linda's book, it's entitled UFO Sighting Desk Reference, United States of America. It is available on Amazon.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour, as once again we return here in the X Zone to where a place is, well, this is a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. But if you believe, come here with facts. Just don't write a book, throw some statistics in it without vetting them, without having the book verified by someone who does analytical mathematical surveys and statistics for a profession. Don't expect people to buy everything that you're selling. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Whatever you do, don't go away.